on a different persona.
Let's go.
At the time of her
Well, test
creation,
one
having her
is
father
to see if
recognize
anything
her,
scary
even
is
though
in
he's
the
a
world.
seemingly
So,
different person from what she
let's go.
remembered, caught Belle off guard as a flood of emotions washed over her. This is what she had been searching for. She's finally getting the recognition from her father who had disappeared. Yet this version of her father was different. He was cold, calculated, and merciless. As Belle begins to realize that this isn't the same man that once raised her, she's brought to her knees in an overwhelming feeling of sorrow and loss. After coming to terms that her father is lost somewhere within the evil confines of Eggman's mind, Belle's
Test number one. I am not gonna open it till land. So let's see. I spawned in the desert biome. So we said, and the sun's almost low. Okay. So I'll be back, guys. Okay, guys, I am finally back, and then it's time. Alright, let me just put it on.
outlook becomes somber. In an emotionally vulnerable state, Belle's friends try to comfort her to no avail.
So the
Overwhelmed by the
objective to get
frightful revelation of who her father
something
has
scary in my
become,
world
Belle's
and
walls
beat the
begin
Ender
to come
Dragon without
down as she
cheating.
spills everything to her friends, explaining that she couldn't believe what she had been told about her father until she saw him face to face. The others tried their best to be understanding of what Belle is
Okay,
going
so what I
through,
wanted
but this
to
is one of
get
those
is
situations that
full
can
netherite
only be
armor from
mended
the
from
nether
within.
without
Much later
cheating.
on, Belle would be abducted by Dr. Starline, who would unearth the truth of Mr. Tinker's disappearance. While praising Dr. Eggman, Starline would trigger a rage-fueled response from Belle, shouting that she wasn't made by Eggman. After her confrontation with Eggman, Belle's father complex has now switched to one of unresolved anger and resentment towards him. With these new revelations from Starline, Belle would learn that alongside Metal Sonic, he reversed Eggman from his Mr. Tinker persona, by proxy, eliminating Belle's father. This admission of Starline's fuels Belle's anger, as he is now revealing that a lot of Belle's issues were stemmed by his actions. During this turmoil, Starline begins to steal Belle's emotional data, which is coded towards loyalty, family, and having a sense of belonging, all of which have been recently stripped from her, and Belle is clear about this as she states that no one cares about her. Even with her new friends, Belle still hasn't been able to see them as family, and is fighting an internal struggle to find a sense of belonging that makes life worth
Okay,
living.
let's see
The
what
Chaotix
the
would arrive
nearest
at the
village
scene to
is.
save Belle from Starline's clutches, and while Espio and Charmy chased after the evil doctor, Vector would take a moment to stay behind and check in on Belle. Vector asks if Starline had hurt her, and Belle somberly replies that he broke her heart. In a kind gesture, Vector tries comforting Belle, but there's little that he can do for her. Belle has come face to face with the man who ended her father and took away her peaceful life. Processing all of this is a burden too heavy for her heart. In order to ease some of the stress and tension that the restoration has been through, Amy takes some of the girls on a camping trip. Belle is brought along as it's apparent that she's still grieving the loss of her father. During this bonding trip, Amy brings out her tarot cards for a reading, and Belle is pretty intrigued, but we see her confidence begin to dwindle as she's concerned that a reading won't work for her since she's a robot. However, Amy is quick to reassure her before continuing. As she pulls out a card, Amy instantly becomes worried, and this makes Belle anxious as she wants to know if it's something about her father. Despite confronting Eggman and accepting that he's a different man from the father that she once knew, Belle's thoughts still linger on him, showing us that she's unable to truly move on at this point. This eagerness to know the card's meaning causes Belle to hit Amy, sending the card into a fire pit. As it burns to ash, Belle begins to shake and apologize numerous times. This is most likely a symptom of her low self-esteem. Amy is not a contentious individual, and such a harmless accident isn't something that would wear on her conscience. However, Belle's actions afterwards are reflective of her dependence on validation, linking her self-worth to how others view her. At this point, friends are all that Belle has now, and she doesn't want to squander her relationship with them.
Feel alright. Just as
Feeling isolated from her friends on an emotional level, Belle slips off during the night, left to nothing but her thoughts. On her walk, a strange noise would garner her attention. Drawing closer to the sound, a Motobug would leap from the nearby bushes right towards Belle, knocking her out. When she finally comes to, the woods around her are engulfed in flames. The Motobug, noticing Belle's hand was on fire, would put it out for her, leading to a curiosity within Belle. Is it possible that other badniks could be redeemed, such as herself? As Tangle catches up, Belle would stand in defense of the Motobug, alerting Tangle that it may in fact be good. However, with more pressing matters at hand, Tangle reveals to Belle that a cub is lost somewhere in the woods, and with this fire, they don't have a lot of time left to act. Together, the two head out to look for the cub. Now, Belle has proven her heroism and bravery many times before this when it comes to defending her friends, but in this moment, Belle would finally find purpose in her actions. Together with her new Motobug friend and Tangle, Belle begins to take command as she manages to make a great leap over a gorge. Despite the scary situation, Belle remains calm under pressure, and as she nears the cub, she's able to demonstrate her kindness as she comforts the child. Belle is very protective of this cub and talks about getting him back safely to his father. This is something that we know Belle wishes that she could do herself. Knowing the pain that loss can cause, Belle has found a protective nature within herself. Throughout the perilous journey to get this cub to safety, Belle does not let go of the child, going to great lengths to comfort them despite the uncertainty of the situation. This protectiveness that Belle has found within herself is very similar to that of Ellen Ripley in Aliens. Now, while these two stories differ vastly from each other, in both we see that the loss of a loved one has made these characters become protective over the innocence and life of a child. In Ripley's case, the loss of her daughter brought out her motherly love and protection when she found Newt. Likewise, in the case of Belle, the loss of her father has brought out her protective nature as she tries to preserve the bonds of family and innocence of those she interacts with. As the group floats down the river, Belle mentions to Tangle that believing in yourself doesn't come easily to everyone. Once again, this displays the internal conflict of self-doubt that Belle is fighting. Upon landing on shore, the cub is reunited with his father, and while the latter mentions that he doesn't know how to thank Belle, we see that having them reunited and happy is all she really needed to see. This interaction here strengthens Belle's confidence as she really begins to feel as though she's making a difference in the lives of others despite not being able to fix her own problems. With this newfound confidence, her friendships with the other girls seem to blossom as well as Belle is finally beginning to feel like she belongs. With her new friend Motobud at her side, Belle wishes to save more of Eggman's creations. So, enlisting the help of Tails, the two begin to work to free the other machines from Eggman's programming. Initially, all seems to be going well as many badniks are seemingly converted. This process begins to give Belle a sense of peace as she feels that this is how Mr. Tinker would want things. Despite the issues with her father, she's finally finding a productive way to heal and move forward from her worries and pain. Unfortunately for Belle, this wouldn't last long. In the middle of the night, both Motobud and Belle would be affected by a signal which would overtake their programming. The two badniks would attack Sonic against their own will, while Tails would make a run for his Seti Sapper. Just in the nick of time, Tails would take Belle down, saving Sonic from a grim fate. As Belle recovered from the shock to her system, she reverted back to her normal state. She ends up revealing to Sonic and Tails that Eggman is summoning an army of badniks before she begins to tear up. Angry and emotionally tired of Eggman's meddling, Belle is now determined to meet Eggman in the flesh and give him a piece of her mind. The constant interference of Eggman in Belle's life has led to an emotional instability in her, making it to where she isn't able to fully put him behind her regardless of her best efforts. Following Motobud to the source of the signal, the group soon realizes that they have no way to stop the badnik since the only Seti Sapper is attached to Belle, and taking it off would compromise her system. Forced into a difficult situation, Belle makes the tough choice to disable her friend, despite the fact that bringing him back after is very unlikely. As Belle lies over her friend in dismay, she finds something within his shell. Pulling out a slip of paper, Belle begins reading a letter written by none other than Mr. Tinker. In this letter, Mr. Tinker writes his last words to Belle, as he tells her how much he loves her, and is proud of the woman that she had become in their time together. He knows the intentions of Starline to reverse his mind, and he wishes to apologize to Belle and the world for what will happen. It now becomes clear to Belle that this Motobug was sent to find Belle and give her this letter, the last remnants of her father. Upset, Belle begins to doubt herself, thinking that it was stupid to believe that she could make a difference. But Sonic manages to get her out of this mindset, telling her that the friends and memories she made between the hard times do make a difference, and no one can take that away from her. Finding solace in his words, Belle finds inner strength and decides to carry on with her friends. Arriving at Eggperial City, the trio encounter Metal Sonic, who is looking worse for wear. Belle doesn't hesitate and volunteers to help him. Thinking that she failed her friend Motobud, and knowing that in reality, she can't save every badnik, Belle is still compelled to help whoever she can, friend or foe alike. After fixing Metal, the two would make their way to Dr. Eggman together, where for the first time, Belle would have the opportunity to talk to Eggman in the flesh. Here, Belle would stand her ground looking at the man who she used to call her father. While this pained Belle, she found her inner strength and told Eggman goodbye, as she has finally come to terms with the finality of Mr. Tinker. Impressed with not only Belle's ability to stand up to him, but her ability to bypass his control signal, Eggman offers Belle a choice to join him as a mechanic or go back to Sonic and his friends. Unsurprisingly, Belle chooses her friends, not wanting to be pulled into any more of this drama with Eggman. From this interaction, I think that Eggman has somewhat of a soft spot for her. Not to the extent of Sage, but he still knows that she's his creation, even if it was by means of his alternate persona. When Eggman leaves Belle, Starline is left behind, laying on unstable ground. This is someone who has given Belle every reason to hate him, but despite what he has taken from her in terms of family, happiness, and peace, Belle still finds the kindness in her heart to try and look out for this villainous character, as she warns him to move away. This call to action, however, would be too late for Starline, as the ground swallowed him up.
Build me all through the night. Turn it.
Having confronted Eggman and finding purpose in helping others, Belle has come a long way from the sad little girl searching for her father. However, it's clear that she isn't fully healed from the trauma that Starline and Eggman have inflicted upon her. But Belle's story isn't one of victimhood. While she has suffered a lot at the hands of others and struggled with internal doubts, Belle keeps moving forward, trying to find ways to not only better herself, but those around her. And this has much to do with how her father raised her. The values that Mr. Tinker imprinted on Belle would become the most important thing that he achieved in his short time, as Belle would take that kindness and compassion and spread it to others. A good example of this is when Belle confronts Metal Sonic. Having repaired him in the past, Belle wishes to stop Metal from this nonsensical fighting. Coming between Metal Sonic and his prey, Belle would plead with him to stop, only to be met by a mighty blow. While Belle failed to help Metal see reason, the fact that she attempted in the first place, knowing that the odds were against her, shows her heroism and compassion. Time eventually heals all wounds, and I believe that the more Belle begins to open up to her friends, the more likely it is that she can continue on her process of healing. Losing loved ones and carrying trauma within ourselves can make it feel like the world is on your shoulders, but Belle's story shows us that even the worst in life can't keep you down forever. Thank you for joining me as we broke down the character of Belle the Tinkerer. Let me know what you think of this character in the comments down below, and comment who you...
Today's video is brought to you by Squarespace. More on them a little bit later.
I never built
Welcome
that.
back to Mecha March Madness
And you guys saw me.
and to Sonic Speed Reading, where we are finally covering the Scrapnik Island mini-series. I talked about this in a different video when
What
the
is
first
this?
issue dropped, and I said we wouldn't be covering it until the entire series
Must
was
be,
out,
a
and
new
it finally
island
is. And
or
since we do
something.
this particular marathon
I
every
know
year, I
what.
can't think of a better time to talk about it in full. This is the first full Sonic story written by Daniel Barnes, and it also includes the art
Okay,
of
the
Jack
Badlands.
Lawrence, colors by Natalie Fordrain, letters by Sean Lee, with editors Riley Farmer and David Marriott. Of course, there are other artists
Okay,
that I
guys,
have mentioned before that have
I'm
included
streaming
some
right now,
interesting
so,
Badnik designs as
does anybody
well.
have,
But yeah,
like,
I will share
I
my
can't look
thoughts
at my
on the
chat
overall
right now
story
since
once
I
we're done
can't
covering it.
close
But I'm
my-
gonna tell you right now, this is one of my favorite Sonic stories ever. All right, we kick things off with Sonic and Tails flying through a treacherous storm. Apparently, it is so bad, Tails says they need to land somewhere, otherwise it's going to rip the tornado apart. And conveniently, at that moment, Sonic notices an island. But to their shock, on this island, they see the Death Egg. And they do take the time to mention that this is the old one, confirming that there have been other Death Eggs in this canon. Now, that could be the Sonic 4 Episode 2 one, that could be the Forces one, that could be both. Whatever the case is, I do appreciate that effort. And at least in this canon, this does confirm that Eggman created a whole new Death Egg when we saw it again. And the original one has been sitting here this whole time. Our two heroes are not sure why it's here at all, but Tails is considering landing on it, which is good because he's not left with a choice as lightning strikes the tornado, sending them hurtling towards the island. We then cut to Sonic waking up, his head aching and surrounded by what looks to be a bunch of broken badniks in a dark, creepy room. He gets up to find his lost sidekick, but as he lands on the floor, he hurts his foot, and at the same time realizing he has a metal contraption attached to it. Very much looking like a saw trap there. But before he has time to really consider what the heck is going on, he hears a beep from the Miles Electric, the little handheld that Tails keeps on him at all times. Something that Sonic says himself. Tails never leaves that just lying around. With the Miles Electric in hand, he begins to call out for his friend, and as we can see behind him, some of those badniks are still active. He begins to make his way down the seemingly abandoned hallways of the Death Egg, thinking to himself that this used to be Eggman's most powerful weapon, and now it's just a total dump. Putting pieces together, realizing that he must have blacked out during the crash. But as he walks by a familiar contraption, we see a red eye come to life, and that's actually what its name is. This is the Red Eye. This was the mini-boss at the end of Act 1 of the Death Egg Zone in Sonic and Knuckles. Not only is that a great callback, and very fitting considering this is the original Death Egg, it's also one of the most stress-inducing bosses from the classic games. Very fitting considering the horror theme of Scrapnik Island. And not only that, it does have a use. As we see from its perspective, it's a security camera, and a mysterious figure watches Sonic's progression through the egg. Sonic peers into one of the many rooms down the hallway and notices a faint glow coming from a sunflower, one suspended in one of the many capsules you find in the games. Getting some Beauty and the Beast vibes from this scene here. Sonic does think it's weird, but once again, his attention is grabbed by something down the way, a loud screech. And as he exits the room, we see a light come to life.
Oh, I wonder who that could be.
Sonic's journey takes him to a giant hangar